In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
It is 100% real. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Dimension podcast, where we venture beyond the ordinary to explore the mysteries and marvels of our world. Can't wait to get into today's podcast with you. Today, we have Gary King back on the podcast. I interviewed Gary about a year ago, episode 6 of the podcast, and we had a great conversation. If you haven't checked out episode 6 of this podcast, make sure you go back and check that one out. But one of the things I missed during that podcast was to cover Gary's firsthand account of the 777 crop circle. So Gary was one of 3 people to be present during the formation of this enigmatic crop circle. I've been wanting to get Gary back on the podcast so that we could cover that formation. So we do that and more in today's episode. So I really don't want to waste any time. Let's get right on with it, and let's welcome Gary King. All right, Gary, we are rocking and rolling. How are you today?
I'm really good, Matt. How are you? Good to see you, mate.
Good. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this one for a few reasons. You know, I told you privately that after we did our first interview about a year ago, I was kicking myself because I was doing deep dives into the crop circle phenomenon. And I just spaced on the fact that you were a firsthand witness to one of the more wild events that happened in and around that topic. And I've been wanting to have you back on to kind of get to the bottom of that one. So we'll definitely talk about that. And the other thing is your YouTube channel has kind of taken off, and I'm a huge fan of your channel.
Thank you.
Tell everybody about what your channel is a little bit and what you talk about there, because it's utterly fascinating.
So I started the channel years ago with the intention, a friend and I were going to do some projects with it. And so I came up with a concept against the grain, the name and so on, and project didn't get off the ground. And, you know, I went off to Mexico and stuff after that. And so I just uploaded some videos of things I'd done in the crop circles sort of during the summer, and a lecture I did here and there. And, you know, it wasn't really doing much. And I thought about doing a podcast. My son and I had an idea to do a podcast together. And then Karen Alexander said to me, you know, why don't you get a podcast together? And I was like, you know, we got the kit together, you know, the mics and stuff, because my son and I were going to do this thing. And so that hasn't gone off the ground because his business took off. So maybe I will. So I did all the artwork and got the channel together. And then I've also had all these ideas for you know, short films. I always wanted to make, when I first learnt filmmaking, you know, the guy who taught me was a Norwegian producer called Roy Lorand. And he said, you know, if you can create sort of compact short films where you keep people's attention, you know, from the beginning to the end, and you pack in the information, but it's not too much and stuff, and you can get the pacing of it right, you know, that's the way to go forward. And so I always wanted to do that. And recently I've had the opportunity to sort of like knock out some scripts that I've had sort of lying around, finish them, narrate them, you know, chop them together on Final Cut and put them out. And I'm getting more confidence as I go along, you know, narrating and stuff like that. Where I was a little bit nervous about my voice, and, you know, as you do and stuff like that. But so I really like it. So that's where the channel's going. It's really exploring. I thought what I do, one of the big projects I'd had on the go.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank you all for tuning in. If you're enjoying this episode and want to help us uncover more mysteries of the universe, don't forget to support Curious Dimension. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit the like button. It really helps get this content in front of more people who are curious just like you. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to click that notification bell too, so you're the first to know when we release new content. For those of you listening on your favorite podcast platform, make sure to follow or subscribe to the show and leave us a rating and review. It helps more than you know. And whether you're watching or listening, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below or send me a message. Thanks for being part of the Curious Dimension community. Your support keeps this journey going.
That again didn't get off the ground. I was going to do something with Darcy Weir with it, and that didn't happen. And so I had this project about comparing man-made crop circles to those that are unexplained. And and it was sort of almost in the cut. I even had a mate, narrate it for me, Hugh Newman, who does the Ancient Alien stuff,
Yeah.
and and all that. I had him narrate a script that I'd written for it, because at that point I just thought, his voice, and Darcy thought his voice is better, well known, and again the projects, like so many, get stalled and it didn't get off the ground, and it sat there, and I thought, it would. Maybe I will narrate it. Maybe I will do the thing. I just, and so I looked at the script again. Like, there was loads of areas I wasn't happy with it. I was it was a project that I'd lost interest in a little bit myself, because, when you're making stuff, you're being creative for somebody else, for an audience that's perceived, and you're not coming from where you want to do it. So it goes against that whole Rick Rubin ethos of creativity. And so there were loads of areas of it where I weren't comfortable with. So I just went back over it and thought, let me do what I want to do with it. Put that out there, and I thought, right, that's the base, so that if anybody wants to sort of like bring up the issues about man-made, say, look, there's a film I made, go and have a look at that. If you can come up with any answers to the points I've made there, then I want to hear them. No one has, and then I got some of these other short films out, which then start to say, okay, look, that's the man-made thing to one side. Let's have a look at the symbols. We've got this symbol here. And so I've done some individual films, short films about particular 2 or 3 crop circles that sort of kind of link. And my last one, Why Crop Circles Matter, that was an itch I've been trying to scratch for years, with this connection with squaring the circle and the yin yang, and, and so, So there's that. And there's the podcast. And the podcast is, I've been interviewing people, a lot of the people that you get as well, like Gary Bobroff, Veronica Goodchild, scholars that have written books on psychology and consciousness, and this is where all this is going, isn't it? This is this route of that we've all, I've been interested in from the beginning. That's why I've tried to stay away from ufology as much as possible, is to say, look, that's nuts and bolts, and I'm really into the consciousness stuff, and so that's the channel. Long answer to a short question, mate.
Yeah, no, but that's the very thing I love about your channel, is you do such a good job of interweaving these very difficult concepts to explain, like consciousness, the psychology, Jungian psychology, crop circles, and you do a really good job of leaving it open and then weaving this narrative through these very difficult topics. And one of your videos that you came out was about maybe 30 minutes long recently, where you did an excellent job of that. What's the name of that video? Because I watched it a couple times.
Why Crop Circles Matter.
That Why Crop Circles Matter. That was the one. If anybody hasn't watched that one, go to Against the Grain YouTube channel, watch that one. You did a great job of explaining squaring the circle with that. I think you even interwove a little bit of Alan Brown's work into there, who he's essential in that conversation. He's done some mind-blowing work. I hope
he was instrumental in some of the ways that last part where we deal with the demonic reality, and where Alan did his research and how he stands for it. Alan wrote some of that stuff, that sort of scripts, because I wanted to consult with him and get that right with his perspective. So, thanks to Alan for that.
Yeah, exactly. We can't overstate that enough. I want to dive into the 777 formation. So let's just give some people some context first before I bring this picture up. Can you sort of lay the story down about this particular formation and, when it happened, and then I'll pull the picture up and we can get right into it.
This story. So it's like one of those stories in your life where, like where lots of things line up, and you could keep going back to the event that triggered the event that triggered the event that led you there, and all of it sort of like makes the story go more wow. Particularly from the subjective point of view, because I was experiencing this sort of surreal day unfolding, from the day in the lead up to that night when we did the night watch. And so the whole thing is a story in itself, which I have to put together one day, I suppose. I've written it down in several ways, but anyway. So,
and maybe just for people also know that this story has been told on Ancient Aliens. I forget, maybe season 10 or season 8, episode 10. You were featured in that.
Yeah. I don't remember how much I told of the story. I can't remember now, but
it was a small section, but they definitely talk about that formation. You're featured in it, and you give, I think it's older footage of you as well, from maybe when that actually happened, video footage. But just want to give some people some more context here. But all right, so let's go.
So I was at university doing a language and communication degree in Cardiff, and I'd been visiting the crop circles for 10 years and largely stayed under the radar for those 10 years, from the groups and tried to stay away from the controversy. Got to know all the figures, let me turn my emails things off. Got to know all the figures that were in the crop circles, who the faces were, bought books, did the whole due diligence thing for 10 years. And then on the 10th anniversary, I had lots of experiences, lots of these kinds of like weird coincidences, and particularly with, the teacher that introduced me to them. He was a peyote shaman from the United States. And yeah, around that guy and around the crop circles, things were very surreal in those days. And then, he sort of taught me different ways to approach crop circles. So for those 10 years, I went at them in a different way than most of the other people were looking at them to do research to prove things. I wasn't doing that. I was approaching them from this sort of consciousness aspect, energetic aspect, let's say, is probably a better way of putting it. So then 10 years in, I got 6-week break, 8-week break from university. So I decided to take my caravan down to the area. It's about 70 miles from Cardiff where I was living. Park it I'd made an arrangement with the landlord of a pub to put it in the back grassed area. He's got a sort of camping field. So I arranged to have the caravan put in there, and it was just a, sort of 10-mile drive to the main area where the crop circles, Alton Barns and, and all that. So every morning I ended up doing this routine. I'd get up in the morning, I'd have some breakfast. I like doing Tai Chi, so I'd do some Tai Chi, I'll do some stretching and stuff outside, sit and listen to the birds tweeting under, in the trees, and then get in the car and drive to the Crop Circle Cafe, which was run by a guy called Charles Mallet. And I'd just hang out, it was one of those places where I enjoyed it's a bit like a festival, you get all these characters. So you'll get someone in front. You never know what you're going to get. Someone walks through the door and they've just experienced something, or they say there's a crop circle they've just driven past it. So you get a report, or you'll get someone, like Professor D'Iberville who's come over from America, and you'll sit and have a conversation. You don't, gurus from India, and there's all sorts of people. So it's just great. You get a mix of ideas, and, it's not your normal.
Great energy in the room, I imagine.
Really, yeah. And then you get to know the regular faces, and you get to know the sort of characters. There's a sort of fixed community of certain people, and then so that was my routine. And every day I'd go into the cafe, and I'd met this guy called Terry Toffness. He was a Norwegian filmmaker who'd produced a documentary called Crossovers from Another Dimension. Really good documentary. It featured Alan Brown. Some of the clips that are in my short films are taken from his film. And every day I went into the cafe, I would stick the DVD player on and put that on, so that when people were walking in, they if they wanted, they could watch this. And there's a big map on the wall. Often people would come in and say, where are crop circles? How do you get to them? So, point out directions and strike up conversations. So on the 6th of this July, I decided that, for some reason, that I don't know why, for some reason, it hadn't even occurred to me about the date so much. I just decided that I was going to do this night watch. And I never really did night watches. I think I did one in the 10 years. But on the morning of the 6th, I woke up really, really early, about 4 o'clock, because it gets light early in the UK in peak summertime. It's like 4 a.m. Really.
So this is July 6th.
This is July 6th. And I wake up really, really early, like 4. And I'm like, I've woke up before, you see, in the past, like that, from Cardiff, from 70 miles away. There was a couple of instances where I'd woke up, bolt upright, about 3:30 in the morning, and thought, I've got to drive to Wiltshire. And I've driven to Wiltshire, and in Eastfield, walked into, there was this 1,000-foot, coincidentally, 1,033-foot pictogram, and a snake, a curly snake, next to it in the same field, 2 formations in the same field. Can't remember what year this was. If you'd have unraveled the snake, it would have also been 1,033 feet, right? Remember those figures, right? Because there's a coincidence with that.
Huh.
So I woke up and thought, wow, energy, it's crop circle. Got to go and have a look, right? So jumped in the car and drove past all the normal places, Avebury and, and Silbury Hill and Alton Barns and Eastfield, Milk Hill, nothing. Couldn't see anything. So I went back to the caravan, made some breakfast, and then, at the usual time, sort of headed over to the cafe and started hanging out. And then at some point during the day, there was like oh yeah. And so that morning, and so that time when I got to the cafe, instead of putting Terry Toffness's DVD on, I put a DVD on about Balls of Light, made by Bert Janssen and Janet Ossebaard, two Dutch researchers, right? They'd made this film about balls of light flying over crop circles, and balls of light, mysterious balls of light, blah, blah, blah. So I stuck that on, just changed it over for a day. I don't know why. Just did that. So then later on during the day, about 1 or 2 o'clock, there's this commotion, sort of little, guy talking, not a bad commotion, it's sort of energy happening. Something's happening over there while I'm chatting to somebody. And it turns out this guy's sort of going out the door behind me as he's come from over talking to somebody over there. And I said, "What's going on?" And he said, that DVD. He said, "I'm trying to buy it." He said, "But they don't take cards." So he said, "I need to go to the cash point and get some cash. I've got to buy that DVD." So I said, "Oh, why is that?" So he said, 20 years ago or whatever it was. He said, "I was here." He said, "There's a ball of light being explained on that film that I was a witness to 20 years ago." But he said, "I thought I was on my own and nobody believed me," right? But he said, "Somebody's just giving testimony about it on that film. And I've never known all this time," right? So he said, "I've got to buy it." I was like, "Oh, great story," So those are the sorts of things, that happen. And this guy was really distinctive, right? Because he was quite a big set, like a weightlifter. And he had this motorcycle jacket on that had these big sort of, padded shoulders,
Mm-hmm.
So he was like, and he had black curly hair and he had quite a presence to him, short, stocky guy. So anyway, he goes out the door and I carry on the conversation. So about 3 o'clock, 20 past 3, somebody comes in and says, "There's a crop circle in Eastfield." So then I say, "No, there's no crop circle in Eastfield, that was there this morning because I drove past it first light. So if there is one, it's appeared in the daylight."
Mm.
So, it's a bit of a drive to get from where we were to Eastfield. So you wait for a second report before you, jump in the car and spend money on petrol to fly over there. Because a lot of people don't realise Wiltshire is 1,300 square miles of fields. You always wait for a second report, when you spend a lot of time over there, because the countryside's a big place. It's 1,300 square miles in Wiltshire. So it's God knows how many, hundreds of thousands of fields of crop. That's what, when people say, "Oh, why don't you set up cameras?" You go, it would be absolutely impossible to cover Wiltshire. And obviously it goes across into Hampshire as well and other counties. So we wait for a second report and somebody comes about half an hour later and says, "There's a load of people standing in the wheat at the bottom of Eastfield." So me and this other guy jump in a car and we fly over there, right? And when we get there, it's a bunch of sort of like a sort of tour bus of people who've come over from Holland, who've basically come across wind damage. It's a common thing, particularly at the bottom of fields. So the wind has blown the crop over, picked up and sort of damaged it. The crop's got phototropism and grown back up and it's got bent nodes in it. And people are standing here going, "It's a miracle." So I went in there and was chatting to some of them and said, "No, this is just wind damage," and was pointing out, what happens when the sun makes it go back up and so on. And I jokingly said to them, "But I'm going to go up there tonight on top of Nep Hill and there's going to be a big crop circle here tomorrow." Yeah, just as a joke, right? What a joke. So I left them there and then I went back to my caravan, and my mum lived not far away. So we went for dinner that night in a local pub, and about 9:30, left there, went back to the caravan to get ready to go and do the night watch. And then my girlfriend calls me from Cardiff and says to me, "Has there been a crop circle today?" So I said, "No." I said, "There were some rumours." And I woke up really early and told her the story. So I said, "Why'd you ask?" So she said, "Well, I've just been to the village in Cardiff and there's wheat growing out of the cracks in the paving stones, like as I'm walking to the supermarket." And like, she lived there all her life. It's in the city. There's no, it'd be
no wheat growing out of the concrete.
There's no wheat growing out of the concrete, right? So she said she saw it as a sign, "I'm coming."
Mm-hmm.
She said, "Are you going to do the night watch?" I said, Yeah. So she said, "I'm coming. Wait for me." So I said, "All right." So she drove down. She got there about, 20 to 11 o'clock, something like that. And we chatted for a while. And as I say, I lived in Cardiff in Wales, and so the symbol on the Welsh flag is a dragon, a red dragon, right? And I had I had a carrier bag, like a bag that you get from a store, that the groceries in. That had a dragon on the side of it. I must have bought it with Wales for me, and I'd use it as a bin. It was in my caravan. It was hanging on a cupboard. And it sparked a conversation about the symbology of dragons.
Mm.
Why, the Welsh dragon and, and the Chinese use of the dragon and, blah, 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 right? So we had this conversation about dragons. Jumps in the car then, 12:30, 1 o'clock, something like that, and drives off to Knapp Hill to Eastfield, right? And when you get to this place, this is what a lot of other people, who've never really been to a rural area at night. There's no lights. It's
pitch black.
It's dark. Yeah. I mean, particularly if there's cloud cover, and there was. And so we get out of the car park and you start walking up the hill, and whereas you think you've got your orientation, you think you know where you're going, you don't. And it's a bit misty as well. And so the torches that we're shining, it's glaring back at us. So we end up walking, instead of going sort of directly up Knapp Hill, we sort of go to veer off to the left and go right around the back of Knapp Hill, sort of the hill next to it's called Golden Ball Hill. Come around then and realise, oh, we're off track here. We've got to go back round. Walk back round the front edge of Knapp Hill, and then start walking up to the summit of it. And then sort of it was weird. In the background, there's this guy that steps forward like a transformer with the motorcycle jacket, right? And he's got his light on behind him. He sort of walked by. He's obviously heard us, and he stepped forward to see. And I recognise him because of the motorcycle jacket as Wynne, the guy that I'd met in the day in the shot. So Wynne, it's Gary, we met today, blah, blah. So we go over.
So he was just there hanging out.
He had all his cameras set up, right? So it turns out, so I didn't know much else about this guy until then, right? So we sit down. He gives, come over, share a blanket. I've got some flask of tea and, and all that. Very hospitable. We sit down. It's windy, really windy. So we've got blankets and sleeping bags and stuff. So I said, so what are you doing here then, Wynne? So he said, I told you I was here 20 years ago and I filmed this ball of light and it made a crop circle, right? And he told the story, right, of this 20-year ago experience that he had. And he said, and I tried to film it, but, by the time I'd got my camcorder open and got it fired up, it had happened already and I'd missed it. And I thought I was the only one who saw it. And, oh, yeah. So are you into UFOs, are you? So he's like, yeah, I've been into it for years. I live up north of England in a place called, it's like North Yorkshire, I think. It's RAF Fryingdales. It's an American Air Force base up in the north of England. And he said, growing up there, he's regularly seen things which don't fly like according to the laws of physics as we know them.
Mm-hmm.
So it turns out that this guy actually worked for Rolls-Royce, designing some of the engines for the aircraft. He worked as a pilot. He was like an inventor, the chip and pin system that you put your credit card in when you put the forward. He invented that for the banks, this guy, right? So, but he had an interest in UFOs. So he had all these cameras set up in his van down in the car park, which he told us about, aimed at Eastfield. And he had this sort of image enhancing camera set up on the hill and a stills camera that he was taking long exposures from. And he showed us all this stuff. I had no knowledge of cameras at that time. I did not own one. I didn't operate a camera. I was completely illiterate as far as cameras were concerned. So it meant not very much to me, only that, you could take pictures with them and record video, and that was it. So we sat down and we had this really, really cool conversation. And about 3:20 in the morning, there was this flash of light. And all I can say is that, we were sort of sitting on the ground. And so all we saw was, for a split second, you saw the grass.
So let me just ask a quick question here. So you're on the hill.
Yeah.
It's you, your at the time girlfriend, this gentleman who was wearing the motorcycle jacket. Was there anybody else there? Any other individuals? No. Just the three of you guys. Okay.
Just the three of us.
All right. And so it's about 3:00 in the morning. And are you in a tent?
No. We're sitting on a blanket, on a ground sheet, and we've got blankets around us, and we're sitting in sleeping bags. So we got.
Are you guys awake, hanging out?
Oh, we're totally awake. Oh, we was. Oh, mate, we were. So this is one of the great things about this night that I appreciate. I think more than the people I tell the story to. But here it is, right? It's very rare, and I'm a bit of a philosopher, as you know. Okay, and Plato's school of philosophy used to talk about real philosophy is not about winning arguments. That's why they oppose the sophists. It's about pursuing truth together. Mm-hmm. You're debating and bouncing ideas off each other. You're borrowing each other's sort of perspectives so that you could eke out the truth. I like Terence McKenna's analogy about going out to catch a fish, and a good idea and land it on the boat. And so often to have those conversations, you need someone who's got a different perspective, but doesn't have an ego, that's not trying to win an argument, right? And not trying to prove his paradigm because he's fearful or insecure about his particular paradigm. This guy was a scientist, and I was going at it from an energetic sort of metaphysical point of view, basically because of chi and sort of consciousness from that perspective of the side of chi exploration in martial arts that gets into that sort of what you would call paranormal realm, where you start getting psychic abilities and strange intuitions, and you're tapping into a side of your consciousness through the practice of qigong and tai chi that sort of starts to open up these kinds of abilities that the Chinese and everybody knows about very well. So that was where I was coming at it from, and this guy was coming at it from a physicist's point of view. Okay, and we were explaining, we were chatting about UFO subjects and then about consciousness and about reality and so on and so forth. And the great thing about the conversation was that we weren't arguing with each other. We were trying to find where words didn't sort of marry up. We were finding words and language which would accommodate, so we could really see each other's point of view and then move the conversation forward. And so we were high. We were really high. There's no way we were sleeping. We were buzzing from this really great conversation because it was like we were exploring, good ideas. Then the flash happens. And partly because we were in such a good conversation, we didn't sort of jump up then and look through the cameras. If we'd have just been sitting there, I'm sure we'd have jumped up straight away and looked through the camera. But we sat there for probably another 10 minutes or so before this bouncing conversation we were on. We stopped when the flash happened and went, "What was that?" And I remember saying, like, if there's a crop circle in that field, I bet it happened now. Just as
right.
And then we got back to the conversation, right? And then the sort of conversation went down, and there was this silence then. And I held my hand out, and I never said this at the time because it's funny because you get that, you think, oh God, if I tell people this, they're just going to dismiss the whole thing because I'm saying I'm a bit woo-woo. So I just kept this part of the story out, most of the original narrative. But Wynne says it in the original interviews. I put my hand out like that as if I'm hovering it over the field. And I said, and it's in the darkness, it's just black, and I just said, it feels like there's something down there. Right. And so Wynne said, I'll have a look. So he jumps up and opens up the flip viewfinder of his camcorder, right?
Now it's night vision, so he can see at night. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not night vision in the green sense. It's a very low lux camera, so it's like 1/250th of a lux or something. It would have gone down to, and obviously you've got the inverse square law. So the further away it was, you're going to get less light for recording when it happened in the dark. But by the time it was now like about 20 past 3, something like that, 25 to 4. Timing's a bit vague now. That he opened it up, and so. The conditions weren't light, but they were probably a little bit better than they would have been about 3:15, possibly. They were certainly enough that when he opened the viewfinder of this camera, we could see it clearly, and we couldn't see it with our eyes. That was the big thing. We were looking at it through that viewfinder, and then looking like that, and we couldn't see it, and then looking back and going, "Is this what?" It was like he was, are you playing back a video or something? Because it looked like the Milk Hill with all the circles, and he was moving the camera like this, and you could just see all these circles. And I was like,
you knew something was there for sure.
Once we saw it, once it sort of sunk in, there's that momentary, is this real light? And then we started cheering and jumping up and down, and then that's when Wynne said, when he sort of zoomed back and you could see the whole thing, he said, "It's a dragon." And me and Paula looked at each other and laughed because we'd had this whole conversation about dragons before we'd gone there the night. And that was what Wynne said, and he didn't know about that conversation. So we saw that as a kind of coincidence. So then that's it. He said, I'm going to stay on the hill and film, jump in the car, drive down and walk in it, and we'll get some perspective shots. And
I mean, that's kind of an interesting, that kind of would have blew me away if he had said dragon, and we've been talking about dragons early that day. I mean, you kind of glazed over that, but to me, that would have kind of blew me away a little bit. I've been like, what did you just say?
Yeah, well, we it's like, I don't know, for some reason, we didn't flag it up to him. We didn't tell him the story. I suppose it's in the excitement of the moment of what's happening in front of us. But
bigger
there was
fish to
enough.
fry.
There was enough for Paula and I to look at each other and just like with the whole of all what's just gone on, just laugh because she's had a coincidence of wheat growing through the paving stones that's brought her down there, and she'd been sort of coming to the crop circles with me for several years before that as well, and had a bunch of different coincidences happen. So I suppose in the long line of things, it was just like, oh yeah, of course, it's like cherry on the cake kind of deal. But there was something in it, and to this day, people have called it the Om crop circle. But to me, it's always the dragon. It's always been the dragon.
Should we pull it up at this point, do you think? Or do you want to finish? You want to carry on?
Sure, no, go for it. Yeah, there's all that's left really is us walking in it and looking like ants that you can see.
Let's take. So could you see this through the viewfinder on the camera? Was it pretty clear what this was?
So no. So what he was doing, he was like, so you see the middle part where you've got like circles that are smaller and they're progressively getting larger as they go out in two different directions, and then there's that thing in the middle, like a sort of umbilical cord or a snake that's coming out of the center of it.
Yes.
So he was sort of panning the camera sort of from the bigger ones down to the smaller ones and then back up again. So we were just seeing these lines of circles. We weren't seeing the whole thing.
Now, maybe for some context, how big are we talking here?
So that's why I mentioned the 1,033 feet earlier through crop circles, because it's exactly 1,033 feet long, right, from one end to the other, 500. So there's this two occasions when the same field during the 10 years of my then sort of crop circle enthusiasm, let's say, when I'd sort of like on one occasion woke up at 3:20 in the morning or something crazy and driven 70 miles and walked in that same field and walked into two crop circles that were both not there the night before and there at first light. So when I got there, it would have been about 4:30 first light when I walked in them. They were both 1,033 feet long. And then some years later, I go and do a night watch over the same field, and a crop circle appears in front of us, and it's 1,033 feet long.
Yes,
it's bonkers. I still don't know why. I still, the numbers still evade. 777. Still, I still don't like. There's so much symbology behind it, but why?
Yeah,
what does it mean?
It got your attention for sure.
Yeah.
And so it's 1,033 feet long. So this is a big formation. So you guys walk down into it around first light, around like 4 something in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, all right. So sometimes when people walk into these things, I've been told that they feel like a sort of static, or there's anomalous things that they feel as they walk into these things. Did you have any of that as you walked into it?
Yeah. Yeah, every step was static electricity, and it was actually interesting because we sent samples off to Levengood, and he said it had been impacted with plasma, which would give you the explanation for the static, because plasma is so highly charged it knocks the electrons out of their orbit. So when we grounded it and trod on it, the electrons were all jumping back into. I think that's the explanation for it scientifically. Anyway, I'm not a scientist, but. He said it bore out what we experienced in the static electricity, and it gave us a headache. It gave us a headache. It was euphoric when we were in there, obviously, but for several days afterwards, we didn't want to go back into it for several days afterwards because it really gave a splitting headache.
And you mentioned the plasma. I had that conversation with Lucy Pringle. She's done her and I forget the gentleman's name who she wrote the book with. It's eluding me at the moment, but he's a scientist. And
Rodney Howe.
Yeah. They go into, in great depth, some profound stories of plasma walls that people sort of ran into, I guess, where there's a high concentration of this exiting of electrons, where people can actually feel the plasma concentrated in a certain area. And
I don't know that.
Yeah,
I've certainly walked up to crop circles and stood in the part, where the boundary of it is, right? And put my hand in, as if you're putting your hand in, like, remember the Stargate when he puts his hand through the thing,
right?
and you can feel it. You can feel a difference.
Yeah. I think that's what they were describing in her book, Crop Circle Energies. But profound stories of clear energy. They've taken readings. They've gone there with tri-field meters, and Jeff Wilson has done the same thing here in the United States.
Yeah,
the data is pretty clear. that there's some sort of high amount of energy involved with the construction of these things. Now, what it is, how it does it is, is up for debate, but those are clear indications that something anomalous is going on here. All right.
Yeah.
So it's around 4:30. You walk into this thing. You can feel all these things going on in there. How long did you spend in it? Did you get out right away, or what were you going?
No, we walked. So we walked. So if you looking at the picture as you're looking at it now, if you look at the on the right hand side as you're looking at it, at the bottom of that sort of arc, the small circles, the second set of tram lines up, we walked in at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then we walked along up. So and you're going uphill when you're walking from that smaller circle that we walked in at up to the big circle that's on the first brow of a hill. That circle that's on the brow of a hill there, you can't see it so clearly that it's on a brow of a hill because of the topography, but it was actually 161 feet by about 140 feet. It's oval on the ground because it traverses the apex of the hill, but so that it makes it look circular from above. It's actually those dimensions. So we walk up to that, and then we walk down. And you're going downhill now to the center of it, where that little sort of strange tail thing is.
Yep.
And then we start to walk up towards the sort of head of it. And then when we get adjacent to that sort of snake thing that's in the center, I have this idea and say to Paula, let's jump in and out. Right? How do you feel now? Right. And this is something, again, my teacher used to teach me about, stopping the thinking and just checking in with how you're feeling and what you're feeling. And so we stopped and we said, right, just ground in a minute. Right, how are you feeling? Yeah, I'm feeling okay. Right, step into the snake thing or whatever it is in the center, right? We'd step into it and get immediately drunk. Immediately like woozy and weird and head spinning and step back out of it into the main body of the formation, it'd clear up. And we did it several times to make sure we weren't going mad. And not going mad, you just had a crop circle appear in front of us. So we walk up to the main. So we walk up to the main, the main head of it, and then go to that circle that's in the center of the top part of the crescent. We go to that and sit in there, right? And at that point, Wynn, who's filmed all of us, filmed us doing that, has got his girlfriend on the phone. I'm frantically ringing people who are not answering the phone. I rang Stuart Dyke at Crop Circle Connector. I rang Charles Mallet. I rang Janet Alsabard. Everybody I rang just didn't answer the bloody phone, right? I was trying to get everybody down there. It's a big crop circle, no one answered the phone. So when then his girlfriend has arrived, she'd stayed in a local B&B the night before. She didn't want to do another night watch because he comes down every year for 2 weeks and does it. So his poor girlfriend had been out every night with him. And the one night she said, I'm not coming out tonight, I'm staying back. It happened.
Right.
So he got her on the phone and said, you got to get down here. So she came down. She arrived with his dog. He had this greyhound dog or lurcher. And so he comes walking in from the other way at the top into that circle that we're now sitting in, Paula and I, with this dog. And this dog's going crazy, right? And chomping, eating eating it, right? And I've never seen a dog like go mad, crazy, eating it, like until a point where it makes itself sick. And he's going, like, he couldn't stop it. The dog was just like on one. And he said, I've never seen it do this. So it had an effect on the dog.
Yeah.
He actually told the story that when he was scouting out locations that night, he wasn't sure where he was going to go. And when he went to Knapp Hill, his dog acted weird. And that's what made him decide to stay there. So the dog was connected to his part of the story as well in that kind of strange way.
That's insane.
So we stayed there till about 8 o'clock in the morning. I suppose we stayed about 4 hours. Nobody came.
Isn't that wild? Like
you are,
you're with this group of people that, they're so passionate about this mystery. And here you are, you've had this profound experience. You're dialing everybody up and nobody's answering. It's almost like maybe you were just there just to have a moment to yourself with just these people. And
that's how it felt. And in the end, Paul and I just said, oh, well, let's give up. Let's go back to the caravan. We're both tired. We stayed up all night. Let's go back and sleep. So we went back to sleep. And then when we drove over the Crop Circle Cafe that afternoon, expecting, the whole place to be on fire with the fact that a crop circle appeared in front of everybody, nobody was that much interested. It was strange. Paul and I looked at each other, was like, this is weird, man. Like this is like huge story. Have we dreamed this? Are we pinching ourselves? Like we'd just woken up. So we like wondered, did it happen? But we'd just driven past it on the way to the cafe. So we knew it was there.
Right.
And it's like it took a couple of days, like later on that night, then Terry Toffner's phone, because he'd gone back to Norway, and he rang me and said, Gary, I've just heard about it. I want to come over and I want to film you and da-da-da. So I said, yeah, sure. And then gradually over the next couple of days, it sort of caught on, and I was getting media calls, and then it went frantic and it went nuts. And I was just like, it was like doing loads of media interviews, and
Yeah.
that's when it all took off.
I mean, it's one of the more profound occurrences in and around this subject. It's, there's other ones that are great too, but I don't know a lot of people that were kind of there, 1 minute when there's nothing there, and then like 1 minute there's something there. And not only is it just like a little something, it's over 1,000 feet long. I mean, it's getting your attention, if anything else. And I don't know how I would react to all that. I mean, I would just be so bewildered.
I've been bewildered about it. Like I think it's a massive event. I think I know it constantly gives me cause to reflect on the whole thing, because I watched the UAP Congress hearings, and they're going, well, do we think that there might be something? And like, I'm not saying this is aliens, right? Because I go down the consciousness road of it all, right? But theories aside, when you've got something like this and no one's paying attention, and yet they're so-called having an inquiry to find out if something might be happening, over there, and you're like, something's wrong here, mate. This is because the following year, I don't know if you know this, but I think you do, because it's in my film, that the following year, because everybody kept saying to me, you're going to do another night watch on 888. And I was like, well, I hadn't really thought about it. And I had so many requests for doing another night watch. I went, okay, let's make a deal out of it. Let's do a big thing, right? Because I think there are probably about 200 people. And so we all met up at the Crop Circle Cafe on the night of the 7th of the 8th, 2008, right? And we split up into groups, laid out the map and split up into groups, said to some people, do you want to go to Barbary Castle? Do you want to cover Knapp Hill? Do you want to cover Milk Hill? Right?
Right, for a bit of fun.
For a bit of fun, right? So by then I was working for Jaime Maussan by then. He was over with a film crew. So we went to Knapp Hill, went back to the scene of the crime, lightning can't strike twice kind of deal. And that's where most people came, to be fair, right? I think a few people went off to Barbary Castle, and most people went to Knapp Hill and Milk Hill. And there was a tea tent set up like a dome, and people were drumming. It was like a mini festival, it was like a big event, as if they were waiting for. And there it was. First light, a huge 8 that never even hit the newspapers.
Let's pull that one up, because I can get that one here real quick. And someone on Instagram, I can't think of the person's name, posts this one a lot and talks about the significance of it a lot. I wish I knew her name. I'd give her a plug right now, but let me find it real quick.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. So now this shows up the morning of August 8th, 2008.
And it wasn't there the night before. So to put it into context again, okay, I say this a lot of times. I haven't counted how many circles are in this. Perhaps we should do that. But, it gets dark, fully dark in the UK at that time of the year at about 11 p.m. And it's light just after 4 a.m. So you got 5 hours of darkness. It's August, so it's going to be a little bit longer, but roughly those hours, right? 5 to 6 hours, let's say. So 5 hours is 300 minutes. And that puts it into perspective about what you can do in 300 minutes. I see people in fully lit up office rooms with an IKEA flat pack with instructions and all the holes pre-drilled take longer than that to put a desk together. Right? And I'm supposed to believe that with 200 people on top of a hill, that some people crept into that field and made that in the dark without anybody seeing anything. And I struggle with that, to put it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people struggle with that. It's just I have no doubt that there are groups of people out there that are talented, that can make some pretty impressive stuff.
There are.
I think they could probably do it in the dark too, but time becomes a factor. The amount of time to lay something down, and then you can take it one step further and you can look at the actual crop. You can look at the anomalous apical nodes in there that, have been elongated or in some cases exploded outwards. So it's I don't know. I mean, the conversation about is there something else going on here? I think we're long past that. I think there's clearly something else happening here. There's clearly some other form of technology that's being deployed other than ropes and boards and people stomping it down. It's not. I don't buy that. So
No, I mean, you can see people. If you look can you see the people sort of dotted?
they're tiny, little ants.
Yeah, little ants there.
Yeah. So
and also what you can't see, right, is that field. If you were looking at the bottom part of the picture here now with the bigger circles that are at the bottom of the 8, then you move towards the center of it. The field goes like that. All right. And so in the middle, it's sort of, it doesn't even flatten out in the middle. It just sort of dips. So where that central sort of emblem, which actually squares the circle, a little hidden quintuplet that's in the middle. Where that lay, it's actually in the dip like that. But yeah, it looks perfect, doesn't it?
Yeah. So we've got undulating ground here. It's not it's not a perfect canvas.
No.
Yeah. There again, there's another little tidbit into this strange phenomenon where it would make it extremely difficult for it to look good on undulating ground. It wouldn't come out this good. And so it's an extra layer of complexity that makes you scratch your head and gets you thinking, which, I mean, I don't know if you've had this conversation with other people, but after I've looked at this for quite a while, I sometimes start to think that one of the main points is to just get you thinking. Just start asking questions.
That's it.
Just get your attention.
Did you see Tom Campbell on Joe Rogan the other day?
I've got about 10 more minutes of it left. And
you're at the 10 minutes when
you go.
You're at the 10 minutes when they talk about crop circles and UFOs then. I think it's because I had to give my mate the time code the other day, 2 hours, 13 minutes in.
Yeah.
He says, what I think is brilliant about crop circles. It's brilliant. He says, it's consciousness waking us up to the fact that we're all interconnected and that there's bigger things, in heaven and earth than we even dreamed of. That's really it,
Yeah, I agree.
He's doing it in a kind way. He's doing it in a gentle way. That's why people, this is so loving, this phenomenon, the crop circles. When you hang around it, you'll be blissed out. You go to crop circles and they'll make you cry. They'll take you on a journey of yourself. It's the internal journey. That's what's happened to a lot of us.
Yeah, and even the hardest core researchers that dig into the geometry of it and the scientific aspect of it, they all have stories of synchronicities. They all have these profound experiences where, it's very personal to them, but I've heard some of these stories, and if it had happened to me, I'd probably feel the same exact way, that there's another going on here that's just getting your attention and kind of playing with you a little bit. And
my teacher used to say, sorry to interrupt you there, Matt. My teacher used to say this, same thing that Tom Campbell was saying, right? He used to say that we're disconnected. We got the illusion of separation from the whole, right? And that there are little blocks of power around the world, he used to call them, where things are happening that will make you turn everything on its head, that will make you question reality, that will question yourself, right? So he pointed out healers in Brazil. He pointed out, like miracles of gurus in India. There's loads of fakes, but there are some that do things which, right? I mean, I was in India. A guru came to the crop circles in 2008. I took him to the Pi formation and a couple of others. And then he invited me to stay in his ashram in India, right? I went there for 3 months. This guy, right, you can see video of this on YouTube. This guy with a white beard and white robes on gets into a fire pit with raging fire going on. He's pouring oils and stuff on this fire and herbs, and his beard doesn't even singe, right?
He's standing inside of a fire?
He's standing inside the fire pit, inside the Agni, inside the fire, right? And people around it are going, not, the fire's like, he's not in the fire, he's not in the flames. The flames are in next to him. But if you get too close to them, you're going to burn, and they'd singe all your beard, right? Not to him. He's got these white robes on, nothing happens.
And he did. So you witnessed this. You witnessed a guy.
No, I haven't witnessed it. I've witnessed the guy doing other things. Is a video of him doing that. There's a
video of him doing this.
Yeah, on YouTube.
I'll have to check that out.
Sri Swamiji. I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
So I stayed there for 3 months, and the thing is, right? So I went and stayed at the casa in Guyana with Joel de Deus, right? And you know, there's darkness there as well, and I felt it when I was there, right? There's darkness and light at the casa. And shortly after I was there, he got arrested for all of his misdeeds, old John of God, because there was the human side of John of God and the spiritual side, right? And that's you know, in order to move out the miracles, because lots of miracles happened over 30 years in that place, and we don't know how, we don't know why. You know, he would say it's spiritual channeling, and doctors he was channeling, and so on. But miracles certainly happen. But here's the thing, right? The point I wanted to make is that there are a number of things at any given time around the world that are happening that question the paradigm. And when you get around them, coincidences happen or strange synchronicities happen. So it's almost like when you get into a frequency or a field or of a vibration of something which consciousness may be doing, the underlying consciousness, the primary consciousness may be doing to wake us up to our illusion of separation. When you get near them as a subjective person, you start to experience coincidences and strange happenings. This is what everybody says.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably something to that. Getting, you know, I mean, I've heard people say this all the time, and you know, obviously that we have dramatic examples of people being able to do things that kind of defy logic, and they seem to kind of, you know, maybe they're not literally walking on water, but some people do seem to get into the zone where they can do things that seem like magic to other people. One of the things in that interview, on that Joe Rogan interview with Thomas Campbell, and I was happy to hear Joe Rogan talk about the crop circle phenomenon. I don't know if I've ever heard him, you know, acknowledge that before.
No, nor me. I was surprised.
I saw a clip from like years and years ago, maybe like one of the first seasons he ever did, where he was kind of putting it down, at least one formation, he was kind of putting it down a little bit. But I was happy to hear him at least acknowledge that there's something else going on there. And I was also happy to hear he had somebody on that kind of went into it a little bit, because, you know, just the idea that there's something else going on, I think that gets people thinking, and that gets people curious. And I think you're right. I think it's there just to say, hey, you don't know the whole story.
Yeah.
But
it gives you a way out, which is why I say it's loving. It gives you a way out. The man-made thing, if you can't handle it, because some people can't handle the paradigm change. Their mind, we live by habits, don't we? And if your habit has been, you know, to view this world in the rigid way that you think it is, materialistic, to turn it upside down in one goes, it's a psychic assault.
Yeah, and this will lead into kind of like the other topic I wanted to talk about with you, because I know you've interviewed some of the people around the Telepathy Tapes podcast, Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell's work, who I had on, I think it was episode 29 or 28, I can't remember, but the Telepathy Tapes podcast, in my opinion, and I think you agree with me, this might be one of the most important podcasts that's out there right now, because what it's doing is exactly what the crop circle phenomenon does. Is it gets your attention and saying, hey, not everything we know about our reality is what it is. And these nonverbal autistic savants are clearly displaying signs of clairvoyance, clairaudience, telepathy with their mothers, their school teachers. And the research funding that I think Diane needs is coming in, and they're just going to do more rigorous testing. But the data that she's collected already, which isn't recent, by the way,
I know.
This data goes back quite a bit. It's already quite compelling. But you've had a couple people on your show. Can you talk to me? What is your feeling about that podcast? What do you feel about the data, and what are your thoughts?
Well, when you say quite compelling, I mean, you know, when you've got like 100 subjects and the results are near to 100% success rate. I mean, you know, consciousness, the current paradigm of consciousness can't explain savants anyway satisfactorily. It doesn't work. Some of them have got, you know, like as Diane said, you know, some of them have got like just fluid in a big part of their brain where things should be happening, and yet they're able to solve complex maths equations and stuff like this, and getting information from somewhere where they've never had it, or they've not even got the faculties to process that sort of stuff as we currently say they should have.
And
So
language.
right. So when you would think that if scientists have put forward the materialist paradigm as they have and said, it's neurons in the brain and this is how consciousness gets formed and so on and so forth, which is this top-down way, isn't it? So, we've got stardust that's dead, and then on top of that stardust, you've got some chemistry and biology, and then, out of that, you've got this little bit of consciousness that sort of randomly appears. That's what they've told us. But what seems to sort of fit the answers to a lot of paranormal experiences are that if we look at it the other way around, where consciousness is primary, and that these other things, that material reality gets sort of built on top of consciousness, and it's not a new thing, panpsychism and those kinds of thoughts, the soulless world, animism, has been around for a very long time. We were told, obviously, in the educated Christian West, that it was the work of the savages, and that Christianity in one form or another was sort of cleaning all that up, and it changed a lot of things. It changed our first person experience of the mystery of reality to be mediated by priests, and they would sort of intervene and say whether or not we were possessed by devils or we're channeling information that might be of use to us, and a prophet, in other words, excuse me. And so this, as Jeffrey Crypower, a hero of mine, has pointed out, as a professor of religion and mystical experience in particular, this is not new stuff. People having all sorts of strange experiences in consciousness. And there's something biblical, isn't there, speaking of Bibles, in this whole thing with the autistic savants that Diane's been researching, in that, Jesus said the last will be first. And these people have been considered the last, haven't they? They've been written off as useless and told by their parents that there's no one in there, right? They're just like, they're running around whooping and throwing their arms around and having panic, having hissy fits and all the rest of it, because it's that their wiring's not right. And we know that some of their wiring's not right, but what the big impact that the telepathy tapes had on me was when I first heard Kai speak. I still get it now, right? With that Mia in Mexico, and I just got this massive sense of validation, of being seen. Of this soul that's inside this body, that's been looking out through these strange kaleidoscope glasses on this reality that we all live in, written off by all of us, and then suddenly she's seen. And I think that's what's had this big impact on me, because there's further down the scale and on the continuum of it is, it's like if you're into these sorts of subjects like crop circles or UFOs or the paranormal, you often want to be seen, that you're not crazy, and so there's some validation, in like, even Joe Rogan saying, people can't be making all of those, and and you go, oh blimey, I feel a bit more validated now because someone else is agreeing. But these kids have had the ultimate validation, and I call them kids not in the derogatory term. It's just because some of them are obviously young adults and adults as well. They're being seen. And so then you dive into this whole controversy where the mums a couple of them that I've interviewed, and I've got I've got Caroline Coleman I'm going to interview tomorrow. She's the mum. She sent me the album actually that her and her son made.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And the teacher, Jess Curzon, who wrote the book about Asher, and communication with him, they've stayed anonymous for so many years, or didn't speak out, because they knew that the paradigm wouldn't accept that they were having these kinds of telepathic experiences with their own children. So it shows how subtly powerful the materialist paradigm is on the world. So, because everybody sort of knows that I used to say this years, guys, so people who speak out are whistleblowers on the paradigm, and they get treated like whistleblowers, don't they? You know what I mean? They get attacked and so on. And so now what's lovely is that since the tapes, people are feeling validated and they want to speak. I've been overwhelmed. I put a post on a Facebook page and said, I run a podcast, and I'd love to chat to some of the mums and carers and spellers and, anybody involved and so on. And I got overwhelmed with people saying, yeah, I'll come and talk to you. Wonderful. And they're genuinely lovely people. And so that's the one side of it. The other side of it is, I got this book here, right, Matt? I've always got books by me.
Yeah.
You seen this one?
Super neat. No, I haven't seen that one yet.
This was written in 1974. I think 74.
Okay.
You could buy it in England for 50 pence. It was written by a biologist called Lyle Watson. And it mentions a guy, a CIA agent called Cleve Baxter, who in 1966 was setting up lie detector experiments. You can obviously science have rejected what happened, but this is what happened, right? He was having a break, and there was a rubber plant next to him, and he decided to hook it up and see if he could detect the water coming from it. Long story short, he set up a whole thing that set up, I think, a couple of books and stuff about the secret life of plants. And so evidence for this sort of stuff has been around for a very long time, and yet there are these gatekeepers that we don't get to see that keep these walls enforced. And the walls are enforced, as we say, that are insidious. They're inside people to actually ridicule their friends and family if they come out and say, I think I'm having telepathic experiences with my son. You can hear people rolling around laughing. So that this whole thing that comes out of it is, it questions very, very seriously with the level of evidence that's being demonstrated with these abilities, that the paradigm at the very least will get upturned, right? That leads us into completely unknown territory. But what I'm excited about, I'll finish on this point, is where it links up with what Tom Campbell said. Tom Campbell's model, saying that the model works if we evolve towards a low entropic state. And a high entropic state is where we currently are in the materialist paradigm, because it reinforces that this is all there is, and it kind of reinforces the greed and the competition and the corporate world of we're living in now, where most of the wealth is held by a few people, and there's lots of suffering, and there's lots of a lack of love and a lack of caring in the kind of system that we're being organized by. And that the message that's coming through these kids is that we need to move towards love and caring and kindness, because that's a low entropic state. And these kids are saying that that's what they're here to do. They're here to help us wake up to who we are and how interconnected we all are, and that we need to all start treating each other a lot more kindly and move towards a world that's filled with love rather than filled with, greed and hatred and violence and so on. So I'll stop there, but that's where I'm blown away by it, mate.
Yeah, well, I mean, Gary, that's an amazing way to kind of wrap this conversation up. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more that, these children are clearly showing these signs and these abilities, and their messages that they're coming through are just utterly beautiful. There's not a negative bone in their body. And I wonder if maybe we're evolving towards this part, or this sort of place where human beings will begin to access maybe this side of themselves. And I think once that happens, deception and lying, these things start to peel away. Because if all of that is real, if all these abilities are real, and I think they are, there's no more secrets. You're able to communicate possibly in a mother tongue that is just a universal language of an emotional, intellectual transfer of information instantaneously. And there's nothing to hide at that point. So maybe this evolution that we're on and this path that we're on will help people get to that point. But that was beautifully said, Gary. I really enjoyed this conversation. Anything else you want to leave people with? Tell them how to find your channel, your website, what you got going on.
Thanks. Yeah. So website's againstthegrain.site. I post everything on there that I post on all my channels, but there's also written material on there, blogs and stuff that we've written over the years. So Against the Grain YouTube channel. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts as well. So on that, you'll find the podcast, and you'll find little short films that I knock out every now and again that sort of like, focusing on a couple of crop circles or certain themes that I'm interested in.
Yeah. Everybody go check out those channels. They're amazing. Gary, this is awesome. Thanks a lot for stopping by. See you later, everybody.
Cheers, Matt. Thanks, mate.
Thanks for watching the show. I hope you guys are enjoying the content. If you're finding any value, please hit that subscribe button, that like button, and leave a comment. It doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps out the show.